The rain had settled into the black stone of Storm's End like a lover reluctant to part, leaving the battlements slick, the air salt-laden, and the sea beyond a sullen mirror of pewter light. King Robert Baratheon, broad as the gatehouse he strode through, tasted the brine on his beard and felt the cold creeping into scars earned in rebellion. He stood alone on the wind-whipped parapet for a long while, letting the hammering surf drown the voices that clamored in his memory. The cries of men dying for a crown now dull and heavy against his brow, the wild laughter of a past that felt larger than any hall could hold. Below, torchlight bobbed in a ragged procession across the inner ward. A train of wagons, wheels groaning like weary oxen, crept toward the belly of the keep, where a makeshift smithy spat red sparks into the dusk. The Discovery, little more than a rumor 2 moons past, had roared into certainty when a vein of queer, dark stone had been prized from the cliffs east of Shipbreaker Bay. The miners swore the rock sang when struck, that sparks danced in shifting colors no ordinary iron could birth. Robert remembered the first ingot hauled into the great hall, a bar no thicker than his wrist, yet so heavy 2 men staggered beneath its weight. Maester Cresson had chipped a sliver free, set it to the coals, and watched as the fragment glowed a hot, bright blue. When it cooled, the sliver proved harder than any steel the maester could name and drank the candlelight with an oily sheen. Rumors spread swift as crows, Valyrian or in the Stormlands. By rights, it was his. He felt the shape of destiny changing like a sword reforged. The Targaryen kings had ruled for dragons and the mystery of Valyrian steel. If Robert Baratheon could tap that ancient well, he would bind the great houses to him not by fear of rumor, but by the promise of blades unbreakable and peerless. A king who could arm 1,000 men with Valyrian-forged steel might hold the 7 kingdoms even tighter than dragons did, without burning a single farmstead. Hoofbeats echoed in the yard. Lord Renly, younger brother bright as summer wine, dismounted and tossed his reins to a groom. Renly's green cloak snapped in the wind, his boyish grin tempered by a seriousness Robert had seldom glimpsed. "The first blade is cooled," Renly called up. "The smith begs your presence." Robert's eyes narrowed. "Has he tested it?" "Against iron, against edge, against plate," Renly said. "It cuts true." The king descended, boots ringing on wet stone. In the cramped smithy, heat washed over him like dragon fire. The master bladesmith, Anders Stoneback, a bear of a man with forearms knotted by a lifetime of hammer blows, waited beside an anvil. On the anvil lay a long sword still gray with quench oil, its fuller etched with a shallow channel that shimmered purple in torchlight. Stoneback lifted the sword, offering the hilt to Robert. "It wants a name." Robert wrapped his meaty hand around the grip. The balance felt uncanny, light, yet promising ruin with every swing. He touched the edge to an iron rod. The rod parted like cloth. A grin split his beard. "Storm Song," he said, the name rolling off his tongue unbidden. "May every rebel heart hear it." 2 leagues inland, Maester Cresson studied core samples in a drafty tower room. Beneath candles' flare, he traced the patterns of striated metal flecks shimmering inside the stone. The old man's quill scratched notes in a ledger already swollen with conjecture. Geological age, volcanic residue, bits of dragon glass fused in primeval catastrophe. The Citadel would howl when they learned of this vein. Valyrian secrets, lost since the Doom, whispered anew in the Stormlands. But Cresson's brow remained furrowed. Unmined veins slept deep in treacherous cliffside layers. Pressed too greedily and rock falls could swallow men by the score. He penned careful warnings for the king. Caution, structural supports, slower excavation. He doubted Robert would heed them. The king had never been one for patience. A soft knock. Princess Myrcella, cheeks ruddy from the sea wind, entered carrying a slurry-smeared rock she'd filched from the wagons. "Maester, do you think it truly came from dragons?" Cresson smiled despite his worry. "Not dragons, child. Fire hot enough to make the world itself weep molten tears. But if the smiths are right, blades born of it may yet rival any forged in Valyria." She set the stone down gently, eyes wide. Father says the sword will make him greatest of kings. Cresson looked past her to the darkening horizon. Greatness, princess, is often measured by what one does with power, rather than how one wins it. He kept to himself, the darker thought nibbling at his mind. Great discoveries birthed ambitions, and ambitions birthed wars. Within a fortnight, word of the Or reached King's Landing. Varys's little birds carried tales of carts laden with midnight metal, of smiths swearing oaths beneath the Storm King's banners. In the drafty lofts of the Red Keep, the Spider and the Queen exchanged glances sharp as knitting needles. Cersei's lips pressed thin. If Robert could arm a new Stormlander host with Valyrian steel, the balance of fear on which she balanced her children would tilt beyond her reach. She sought counsel from Lord Tywin, sending ravens swift and laden with ink-heavy pleas. The answer came in her father's decisive hand. All things burn. Steel, no matter how rare, melts eventually. Delay, distract, deprive. So invitations were dispatched. Grand tournaments in the Reach, high harvest feasts, promises of trade benefits to houses whose loyalty wavered. While bards sang of golden roses, hidden knives worked at the roots of Robert's new power. Ships sailing for Storm's End were waylaid by storms that came from cloudless skies, or by pirates suddenly brazen in the narrow sea. Yet still the mine yielded. Robert pressed every able hand into service, paying double wages in silver stag coins newly minted. The Stormlands rang with the clamor of hammers, the flicker of forge fires staining night skies red. Deep inside the jagged cliff network, lanterns sputtered against dank air. Ser Donnell Swan, gaunt in sooty plate, led a detail to secure new shafts. Pickaxes struck an odd hollow space behind a shale wall. When the seam cracked, a gush of warm, sulphurous air hissed out, sending torches flaring green for an instant. "Hold!" Swan barked. The men drew back, coughing. A void yawned in the rock, floor sloping down into darkness wide enough to swallow their puny lights. Strange crystals glimmered amid black scoria, shards translucent as broken glass, edges chiseled fine. The captain's torch revealed glyphs scorched into the stone, spiral patterns reminiscent of Valyrian sigils but older, less refined, as if scribbled by titans learning their letters. Swan's skin crawled. "Fetch the maester," he murmured. News of the cavern reached Robert on the training yard, where he tested Stormsong against 3 seasoned knights at once. The king's laugh boomed as bright as any smith's hammer when he disarmed them in a blur. But the moment the messenger hissed about glyphs in the mine, Robert's eyes darkened to storm cloud gray. "Valyrian markings? So they say, Your Grace." Robert flung his shield aside, sweat misting around him. "Show me." The descent felt like sinking into the bones of a sleeping dragon. Heat rose from unseen fissures below, the air humming. Cresson's torchlight caught the glyphs, interlocking spirals, sigils of houses long dead. He transcribed them frantically, comparing to rarities within the citadel's sealed vaults. But many symbols were unknown. Robert touched the wall. It throbbed faintly, like skin over a living vein. What sorcery forged this? Cresson's voice trembled. Not sorcery, perhaps, but craft lost since the world was young. If this is a mother vein of the metal, the implications. Robert scarcely listened. In his mind unspooled visions of hosts clad in night-black plate, banners rising across Westeros, the 7 answering to his name alone. But another vision whispered underneath. Dragons waking, old powers stirred to resentment by men who dared pluck at threads woven before the Dawn Age. He shook it off. "Seal this chamber." "Your Grace." Cresson blinked. "Only I decide who plunders it. Post 50 men. Kill any who dare steal a single shard." High above, a raven beat its wings toward the eyrie. Stannis Baratheon, ensconced there his hand, read Robert's curt letter with brows drawn tight. His brother spoke of fortune beyond measure, demanded ships, men, and secrecy. Stannis smelled folly. Valyrian steel was a gift, but one given by forgotten gods often carried curses deeper than the sea. He penned reply after reply, discarding each until his study was littered with crumpled parchments. At last he settled on blunt honesty. "Brother, your mind will rouse every viper. Guard your throat. Gold buys blades, but fear buys betrayals. Temper pride with caution, or you may find the crown heavier than iron." But he knew Robert rarely read past first lines. In the Reach, Lord Mace Tyrell toasted the birth of his grandson while quietly commissioning spies among Stormlander smiths. Inquiry revealed that forging the new metal required heat unsustainable by common forges. Special bellows lined with Dragonskin-like clay were needed to keep the flames from sputtering. The Tyrells possessed no such knowledge. Rumor claimed Qohor still guarded kindred secrets. So emissaries sailed from Old Town under Tyrell colors, ostensibly bearing wine gifts, but covertly seeking the mysteries of the 9-Day Forge. In Dorne, Prince Doran Wade reports in the Water Gardens, murmuring that another Baratheon dream of dominion would end as all such dreams ended: bent knees or broken crowns. Yet he sent Archmaester Ricasso's nephew northward disguised as a spice merchant, for knowledge was a sword no blood price could match. The Stormlands, long dismissed as windswept marches, became the eye of every Ravenborn missive. Winterfell's gods would stood hushed under pale moon. Eddard Stark knelt beneath the heart tree, eyes closed. He'd received Robert's letter too. Exuberant, wild, boasting of the discovery. Ned heard the fear behind the words. Great power changed men. Robert once wore his crown lightly. Now he sought to weight it with iron unbreakable. The Northmen prayed to the old gods for guidance. The weirwood rustled, its red leaves whispering secrets too soft for mortal ears. Ned rose heavy-hearted. War had not touched Westeros in 14 quiet years, an uneasy lull. But new metal in Robert's hands would unsettle balances. Lords who resented the stag throne might band together with those who coveted the bounty. Ned resolved to travel south come spring, counsel his friend in person. He doubted Robert would listen, but friendship demanded the attempt. Weeks slipped by in the underbelly of the mine. The mother vein widened, branching like a dark river. Workers carved scaffolds, hauled or night and day. Robert visited often, storm song sheathed at his hip, watching each wagon ascend the lift. He spoke of raising new forges, of granting lords annuities of blades in exchange for unwavering fealty. It was Renly who first noticed the men's eyes. Miners returned from lower tunnels pale, teeth chattering though sweat soaked their tunics. They whispered of voices in the stone, soft as distant gull cries. Some claimed to see shapes flicker at the edge of torchlight, shadows that slithered against grain where no shadow should. One man gouged his own ears, screaming that the song of the rock would devour his soul. Robert dismissed it as cave madness. Men fearful of shadows were not born to wealth, yet deaths mounted. One slip shattered a collarbone, another cave-in buried 6. The funerals lined the Rainwood Road, widows holding limp hands of children while the king spoke brave words. The Stormlander smallfolk had always been loyal, but rumor of cursed mines spread fast. Maester Cresson pleaded again. Scale back, shore up tunnels, switch to shallow vein extraction. Robert thundered that fortune favored boldness. Cresson's ravens to the citadel grew sharper, but replies scarce. Other maesters were arriving in Storm's End, lured by the chance to witness history. Their presence only fed Robert's conviction. On a Stormlands night, when cloud and sea fused in a single roaring blackness, cries rose from the deepest shaft. Robert, half drunk on sour Dornish red, descended in linen tunic and boots unlaced, swinging a lantern. He found Ser Donnell Swan kneeling beside a fissure. Steam curled upward, stinking of sulfur and blood. Swan's visor dripped crimson. His voice shook. My men, they struck something. A cavity filled with liquid iron or, gods know what. It erupted. The heat boiled them alive in mail. Robert gazed into the fissure. Embers glimmered below like sullen eyes. A pulse thrummed in the rock, slow, vast, alive. For the first time, dread pricked his heart. He ordered the lower tunnels sealed, but the ore riders above clamored for quotas. Contracts promised to lords of the Stormlands needed fulfillment. Even as coffins piled, wagons still rolled, carrying black ingots to forges. Stormsong drank whetstone daily, its edge whisper-sharp. Yet Robert began to dream of flame-wreathed crowns, of dragon jaws gnawing at the foot of the Iron Throne. He woke sweating, the sword across his lap. When the first Valyrian steel arrowheads were fitted to ash shafts, archers tested them against oak shields. The arrows sliced clean through lacquered planks and buried half their length in stone walls behind. Robert crowed triumph, but Stannis's letter arrived, ominous, chiding, reminding him of Mad King Aerys, who harnessed wildfire and lost his mind to green flame. Robert tore the parchment and cast it to the brazier. Yet the words lingered. He called a council. Lord Selmy, Caron, Penrose, and ancient Estermont crowded into Storm's End's great hall. Barrels of ale flowed. Robert proclaimed a grand order. Every Stormlander house would receive 100 blades forged of the new metal in exchange for levies tripled in men and supplies. The lords cheered, but some exchanged uneasy looks. As they feasted, Renly found Cresson alone at the table's edge, eyes on the flickering torches. "Is this blessing or bane?" the young lord asked. Cresson's voice was low. In Valyria, dragons forged empires beneath smoking mountains. Their ruin came when those mountains vomited ash and doom. Power is fire, bright, hungry, quick to leap walls built by pride. Renly tilted his goblet, watching red wine whirl. "My brother believes fire is his birthright. Will you counsel him?" "I will." Cresson's hands trembled. "Whether he hears is another matter." Far offshore, a Braavosi galleass cut through choppy waters, Captain Jalabar waving letters of credit signed in King's Landing's green-inked seal. The Crown financed secret purchases, dragonbone bellows, rare flux powders, and a Cohoric metallurgist named Ulrich's Mare, who claimed to hold recipes for forging folded Valyrian layers without dragonfire. Gold can pry open lips sealed since the doom, if offered in chests enough. Yet with every chest shipped, the crown's coffers bled. Master of coin John Arryn fretted, counting coppers he did not have. But Robert ignored admonitions. "We'll mint new coin of storm silver. Let the realm pay homage." When coppers ran thin, taxes rose. Grain tariffs along the Rose Road, harbor fees in Blackwater Bay, levies on sept tithes. Whispers began in taverns from Duskendale to Gulltown. The stag grows fat on steel while small folk tighten belts. Autumn winds left russet drifts in the Stormlands groves. A hush lingered in the mine tunnels now, less from fear, more from exhaustion. Yet deeper each day crews hewed, chasing the mother vein like hunters after a wounded boar. Some swore it widened ahead of them, as if guiding picks to its heart. Then, on the eve of the harvest moon, a rumble stirred the cliffs. Lanterns swayed. A long crack speared upward through stone, splitting the main tunnel. Cresson, present to survey supports, felt the floor buck. He shouted for retreat, his old voice lost beneath the roar. Outside, at the edge of the sea, the cliff face shuddered. Birds shrieked skyward. A gout of flame, blue and searing, burst from a newly forming vent, sending shards of obsidian hailing into the surf. The shockwave toppled wagons, flung men onto the shingle. In the smithy, forges flickered violet, then went dark. Stoneback fell to his knees, clutching his head as if a forge hammer struck from within. Robert rushed from the keep, Stormsong bared. He saw tongues of cerulean flame jetting from cracks in the cliff, steam hissing where the sea met the sudden heat. The air pulsed, an otherworldly roar beneath hearing range. Renly joined him, cloak torn by wind. "The mine, it bleeds fire." Robert's knuckles whitened on the sword. "Then we dam the bleeding. Fetch every mason, every man with stone sense. Seal it with rock and faith." But sealing a wound in the earth is no easy task. The cliff held secrets older than Storm's End itself, perhaps older than the first men. Ravens blackened the skies for 3 days, wings beating north, south, east. Some carried pleas for aid. Others bore cunning words to rivals. An opportunity, a weakness, a king overreaching. In Sunspear, Princess Arianne listened as Maester Kimmiz read the message. The promise of Valyrian steel enticed, but the tremor of the land spoke louder. He digs his own grave, she mused. At Riverrun, Hoster Tully coughed in feather-lined bedclothes while Lord Edmure weighed the letter in hand. A bride's price inflated by swords no enemy could parry stirred his imagination. In Pike, Balon Greyjoy's laughter echoed against damp stones. Ironborn thrived on chaos. If the stag stumbled, the kraken would feast on wreckage. And beyond the narrow sea, in the shadowed halls of the citadel's Anatheum, cloaked acolytes unfurled Crezen's charcoal rubbings of glyphs. One old archmaester whispered that the patterns predated Valyria, belonging to a people swallowed by myth. The deep fires, makers of weapons so potent even dragons kept their distance. Speculation birthed fear. Fear birthed plots. Winter's first kiss cooled the Stormlands nights. Crezen, restless in his chamber, dipped quill in ink, drafting a final plea. Abandon the deep shaft, focus on safer seams, let the rock rest. He sealed 2 copies, one for Stannis, one for Eddard, then paused, quill hovering. Perhaps he should address the citadel itself, bypassing Robert's pride. A knock rapped soft. The door cracked. Young Princess Myrcella slipped in, eyes wide. "The sword sings at night," she whispered. Crezen frowned. "Storm song," she nodded. "I heard it through the walls, like wind in a flute." The maester knelt, placing wrinkled hands on hers. "Swords cannot sing, child." Her gaze held his. "This one does." Robert's dreams grew stranger. He stood before a river of shimmering metal, its surface rippling with reflections of pale faces without eyes. They beckoned, mouths open in silent screams. He'd wake clutching storm song, the blade humming faintly, a vibration in his bones. He summoned Stoneback, demanded explanation. The smith gestured helplessly toward the forge. "We fold the metal 7 times 7, as Mare instructed. The alloy is alive, my king. Every strike of the hammer feels," answered. Robert laughed too loudly. "Blades don't answer back." Stoneback did not smile. "This one does." An envoy arrived from King's Landing. Lord Janoslynt flanked by gold cloaks. Cersei's let. Tur, honey-poisoned, congratulated her husband but suggested transferring mine oversight to the capital for safety. Robert ripped the scroll and threw it at Slynt's feet. "Tell my wife the Stormlands are mine, and so is what sleeps beneath them." Slynt departed, but spies remained. That night, a storage shed near the forge erupted in flame. 3 barrels of were disappeared. The culprits vanished into the rain-drenched forest. Robert's fury shook the walls. He ordered double watches, hangings for traitors, and bounties on spies. Fear settled on Storm's End like a second, colder winter. The mine's heartbeat resumed, slow, deep, but muted. Engineers braced tunnels with ironwood beams, plastered vents with clay and ash. Work resumed, though miners crossed themselves before each descent, whispering prayers old as the 7. Crezen prepared drafts for men plagued by nightmares. Many refused the moon tea, claiming the dreams were prophecies, visions of black wings beating across Westeros, of swords falling like meteors upon battlefields ripe with corpses. Renly watched Robert grow leaner, no longer the bulky boar of tourneys past, but iron-hard, eyes bright with feverish purpose. He feared his brother's hunger would swallow them all. So Renly wrote quietly to Lord Loras Tyrell, to Lady Olenna, sowing seeds of alliance, should the realm splinter under the weight of storm-forged steel. Snow dusted the Dornish marches by the time the first sword shipment left Storm's End. 30 blades bound for House Cairn, payment for coffers borrowed. Each blade bore ripples of purple and black, edge so keen it parted parchment under its own weight. Word of their beauty echoed across inns and market squares. The price of ordinary steel plummeted. Smiths petitioned for training under Stoneback, who chose apprentices seldom and harshly. In Highgarden, the Tyrells tested a stolen arrowhead against Oathkeeper's dummies. It sheared through chain and mail, burying itself hilt-deep in straw. Lord Mace's eyes shone with greed, but Lady Olenna saw only the first thread of a tapestry that ended in flames. New Year's Day dawned beneath crimson clouds. An omen, the Septons murmured. Robert called for a spectacle, a sword-blessing ceremony atop the fortress walls. Nobles gathered in furs, breath fogging. Robert held Stormsong aloft, its edge catching the weak sun in violet sparks. He spoke of unity, of forging a realm that no foreign blade could harm. His voice thundered across the yard, stirring hearts. Yet, as he lowered the sword, the stone beneath his feet trembled. A dull boom shuddered up through the foundations, rattling banners. Cressen's face went ashen. Another vent. Cracks veined the courtyard flagstones. An acrid stench rolled up. The crowd gasped. Then, from somewhere deep below, came a low, resonant toll, like a bell forged from molten iron. The sound set Stormsong vibrating so fiercely Robert nearly dropped it. Myrcella clapped hands to her ears, tears spilling. Horses reared. The bell tone rose, crescendoed, and fell away, leaving stunned silence. Robert found his voice first. "The mind speaks its warning," he declared loudly, forcing confidence he did not feel. But the Storm King does not fear echoes in stone. Privately, Cressen told him the truth. The vent they'd sealed had not died. It had found new pulses, deeper, older. He begged Robert to halt excavation for a moon's turn. Robert dismissed him with a curse. That night, Stannis arrived unannounced, having ridden hard from the Eyrie. He strode into Robert's solar, wet cloak dripping. "You dig like an errant fool," he said without preamble. Robert embraced him, but the warmth faded quick. They argued until dawn. Stannis invoking duty, Robert roaring about legacy. When words failed, Robert knelt and placed Stormsong across his knees. "Feel its hum," he urged. "This is fate, brother." Stannis touched the flat. The metal trembled like a caged hawk. He yanked back, fate forged by blind greed.
Roberès le terre rend au
Greed? For security, for our children's children? I would give every drop of mine own blood for their safety. Stannis stared at him. "Be careful, the blood you spill is not theirs." He left at dawn, the rift between brothers widening. In Braavos, Ulrich's mare oversaw a shipment of fluxes when a masked stranger slit his throat. The assassin left no mark but a single obsidian shard on the corpse. A warning from someone versed in old fires. Secrets died with mare, and new techniques vanished into canals. In Qohor, the 9-day forgers shut their gates to Westerosi agents. Prices tripled. The crown hemorrhaged coin to keep shipments flowing. Jon Arryn collapsed over account ledgers worn by stress. The hand's health waned, mind turning to thoughts of resignation. He pondered seeking aid from Lord Stark, but feared the king's wrath. Deep winter gripped the land. Snow in the Stormlands was a rarity, yet flurries danced across Shipbreaker Bay, dusting cliffs that steamed faintly where internal heat met freezing air. Miners now descended only under guard, for sabotage plagued rails and hoists. Shafts collapsed not from nature, but from deliberate tampering. Kingsguard investigations yielded few culprits. Fear made tongues stone. Robert posted Stormlander knights at critical points. The lines between warfare and mining blurred. Grim humor circulated. "We dig trenches into hell, and hell digs back." Still, the mother vein widened, blacker, richer. Stoneback forged a greatsword for Ser Barristan Selmy, christened Lightning Fong. Each test cleaved through plate as though parchment. Barristan, loyal but wary, thanked the king and sheathed the weapon deep, uncomfortable with its hungry weight. One bitter dawn, a raven from Winterfell brought Ned Stark's terse promise. "I ride south come first thaw." Robert exhaled gratefully, the old friend who told truths. Yet he remembered how stubborn Ned could be, and Robert was unwilling to surrender the mine to caution. He planned a royal progress, inviting lords to witness the marvel. Renly argued for postponement, but Robert insisted. A king who hides his crown invites usurpers. Preparations began. Pavilions erected along the Rainwood's edge, feasting tents, arenas for sword demonstrations. Stoneback bent himself to forging showpieces. Daggers that shaved slivers of steel, spearheads light enough for a child to wield. The realm buzzed. Small folk dreamed of coin earned from visiting nobles. Merchants of fortunes made selling trinkets stamped with a black stag. Robert envisioned acclaim rolling like thunder across Westeros, all kneeling in awe. Below, the mine's hum deepened, slow, resonant, like a dragon's breath beneath restless earth. The glyph-covered cavern, long sealed, now glowed faintly along etched lines. Krezen ordered watchers, who reported the lines pulsated with pale light in rhythm with the forge hammers above, as if the stone kept heartbeat with human industry. Some swore they saw shapes move beyond the sealed wall. Tall silhouettes, horn-crowned, eyes ember-bright. No door existed there, yet the silhouettes paced like guardians. When Krezen relayed this to Robert, the king spat wine. Ghost stories. But his hands trembled as he poured another cup. On the eve of the royal progress, storms rolled in, heralds of the mine's namesake. Thunder boomed, echoing the deep heartbeat below. Ships bearing noble guests hugged the coast, masts threatening to splinter. Cersei arrived last, escorted by a column of Lannister guards. She wore crimson velvet, eyes cold. In private, she confronted Robert, accusing him of endangering their children. He bellowed that she cared only for Lannister gold. She retorted that gold at least obeyed when counted. His fiery or devoured coffers faster than wildfire. Their fight raged till servants fled the hall. In its aftermath, Robert stalked to the forge, demanding a new tuning of Storm Song. The smiths reheated the blade, folded its spine again. Sparks flew violet, casting dancing shadows on walls. One spark flittered onto Robert's wrist. He felt no pain, yet the skin blistered black in a spreading starburst. He wrapped it, said nothing. Dawn of the progress. Rain-washed, slate skies. Nobles gathered on cliff platforms overlooking the sea. Robert addressed them atop a dais of oiled planks. Krezen watched, heart leaden. Behind the dais loomed the main shaft opening, now ringed by scaffolds and sigil banners. Steam curled faintly from below. Robert spoke of unity, of forging peace sharper than swords. Lords cheered, some sincerely, others calculating. He lifted Stormsong high. At that instant, the cliff shuddered. A roar burst from the shaft, hotter than any forge. Blue fire erupted, engulfing scaffolds, screaming men tumbling into the abyss. The platform buckled. Nobles scattered, some tumbling over railings into sea spray below. Robert stood transfixed, blade raised, as a column of flame licked skyward. The glyph cavern cracked apart, light searing. Krezen saw not stone, but a gate opening. Figures stepped through, towering, wrought of black metal veined with living fire, their eyes pits of molten orange. The crowd fled. Knights drew steel that seemed dull and brittle beside the newcomers' shimmering forms. The intruders did not strike. They merely watched, heads tilting as if appraising. The flame receded. Silence returned, broken only by waves hissing against heated rock. Debris smoldered. Screams echoed from lower ledges. Robert lowered Stormsong. The blade flickered with inner light, as though tasting what had emerged. Krezen approached, ash falling from his hair like snow. "What have we woken, your grace?" Robert's voice rasped. "I know not." He turned to the gathering survivors, voice swelling despite smoke-scarred lungs. "But whatever threatens my realm shall face Stormsong and fall." Inside, dread coiled like a pit viper. For the first time, he wondered if the sword sang not of triumph, but of mourning yet unwritten. Night fell thick and starless. Healers tended burned men. Robert convened his war council. Renly argued for closing the mine forever. Krezen urged summoning the Citadel's archmasters. Baratheon advised fortifying Storm's End against unknown foes. Robert paced, beard matted with soot, eyes wild. "The ore will not be abandoned," he declared. "We simply dig wiser." Stannis, arriving belatedly with a relief fleet, entered to hear those words. Wiser would be sealing that hellhole, Robert whirled. I will not cower, Stannis spoke softly. Then watch as all you love burns. Their gazes locked, unyielding iron meeting unforged stone. Beyond Storm's End, ravens once more beat frantic paths. Tales spread of flame demons, of lightning singing in the king's sword, of miners boiled alive. The small folk named the place Storm's Mouth, claiming the sea would swallow it soon. In King's Landing, whispers reached the Red Keep. Grand Maester Pycelle pressed leeches to flabby arms, muttering that deeper fires than Valyria's stirred. Varys smiled thinly, weighing chaos against opportunity. Cersei penned letters to her father urging immediate intervention. At the Twins, Walder Frey calculated bribes, hostages, and the rising cost of neutrality. On Dragonstone, a red priestess gazed into flames and saw shapes of black glass rising under storms, a stag crowned in blue fire, and a sword that sang the end of kings. Robert stood alone in the forge, storm song resting across the anvil. He pressed his burnt wrist to the cool pommel, listening. The blade vibrated faintly, like distant thunder. In its hum he fancied a voice, neither man nor woman, but some vast chorus singing of forges beneath the world's skin. And he knew the song would not be silenced by mortal will. His kingdom balanced on a knife forged from newer, darker steel. And the knife was hungry, but Robert Baratheon, ever the hammer, resolved to strike first. Thus the stage was set. A king armed with metal that whispered of cataclysm, a realm poised between awe and terror, and forces older than Valyria stirring beneath Storm's End. The discovery of Valyrian or promised glory, but in its glint lay omen of fires to come. And so, as winter's breath crept farther south, the saga of the storm-forged steel began in earnest, each heartbeat of the mine echoing through hearts of men who would soon learn that some songs, once woken, could never again be caged. Snow settles over the canted roofs of Storm's End like a quiet siege, muffling the cries of gulls and turning torchlight to trembling amber. In the deep hours before dawn, Robert Baratheon lies awake beneath a furred mantle that fails to warm him. The hammering of his heart keeps pace with the distant pulse in the mine, a slow thrum like a war drum beating under the world. He tells himself it is only wind rattling through the newly braced shafts, but in his chest the echo feels older, heavier, as though the rock has dug claws into his ribs and begun to haul him downward. Beside the hearth, a single log gutters green-tinged. Resin hisses, bright veins of sap igniting like wildfire in miniature. Robert watches the flame fork violet fingers, and for an instant he sees a sword shape inside the fire, long, narrow, lined with molten runes. He blinks and it is gone, leaving only the ordinary crackle of wood. Yet the image lingers with the stubborn clarity of an omen. He rises, girds himself in a plain tunic, slips Storm Song from its wolf leather sheath, and pads barefoot through cold corridors to the courtyard. The snow has stopped, leaving a crust that crunches under each step. Every crunch seems to answer with another, deeper footfall below, as though some unseen walker mirrors his path through the caverns. He stops at the yard center and lifts the blade. No wind stirs, yet the steel, if steel it is, hums in the stillness, the edge shimmering as if lamplight threads inside the metal. Robert raises the sword to the star-blank sky, inhales the brine-heavy air, and whispers an oath meant only for the gods of storm and stone, that he will master whatever sleeps beneath his cliffs or die with the attempt. The sword's vibration swells at the words, then fades, and the silence feels like held breath. When dawn breaks gray, the castle stirs to grim purpose. Carpenters and quarrymen march toward the shattered scaffold, orders to rebuild ringing from horse sergeants. Maester Cresson oversees triage in the chapel, binding burns with honeyed linen while muttering prayers older than the seven. He moves from pallet to pallet, reciting names of plants that soothe fever, but the words slur with exhaustion. He has not slept since the vent burst. In one corner lies a miner whose skin blisters black and blue where flakes of glassy or embedded during the eruption. Each shard has to be twisted free with iron tongs heated dull red. and the man's screams echo off the sept's high arches until the stone seems to vibrate with an agony that belongs to the fortress itself. Renly stands watch near the pyre pits, where corpses blacken under sweet rank smoke. His cloak reeks of cedar tar and death. When Robert approaches, Renly's boyish face has hardened into something leaner. He voices the question that has troubled every whispering hall. What were those figures glimpsed through the flame, tall and horned and glowing from within? Robert answers with a shrug too heavy for levity. Shadows, he says, tricks of heat against rock. But in his eyes, Renly reads the fear his brother refuses to name. Messages arrive hourly, some charred round the edges as if ravens flew through cinders. From King's Landing, Pycelle begs the king to return for a full council. From Casterly Rock, Tywin Lannister offers engineers versed in undersea tunnels, a gift wrapped in silk-gloved menace. From Old Town, the Citadel dispatches 3 archmasters whose robes smell of dust and locked vaults. They ride hard, escorted by silent novices who carry coffers bound in bronze latchwork. On the road through the Rainwood, they pass refugees fleeing the mine, wives of dead miners, timbermen whose axes splintered against unfamiliar stone veins, septons dreaming of boiling walls. They clutch crude talismans, bits of obsidian and iron twisted into sigils against deep fire, and murmur that the king has opened a wound in the earth that no leech of Pycelles can close. Within the cliff, deeper teams venture by lantern glow. Ser Donnell Swan commands the vanguard, visor darkened with soot so thick it hides the gilt of his helm. With each yard gained, the air grows hotter, though winter freezes the world above. Crystals sprout from cracks like frozen lightning, emitting a thin chime when touched. The miners wrap them in lamb's wool, pack them into iron chests, and mark each chest with charcoal runes, hoping mere symbols can cage an unsettling resonance that makes teeth ache. They speak less now. Language phrase in the tunnels, vowels swallowed by the living rock's reverberation. When they emerge, cancers of silence cling to them. Men stand at hearths unable to explain what they heard down there, how the walls breathed tide-like sighs. Baratheon Selmy tests lightning fong on the butts of old training dummies. The blade have straw, slices mail, and when pressed edgewise to stone leaves a line of obsidian dust. The Kingsguard whispers he has never held anything so weightless or so hungry. He counsels Robert to slow distribution until the Citadel masters confirm the forging process safe. But Robert laughs that war waits for no archivist's seal. He demands faster output, promises Stoneback lordship if he doubles yield by spring. The smith bows, yet in the glow of his forge the runnels of sweat on his forearms shimmer with the same purple gleam as the newly folded billets. It is as if the metal sweats through his skin now. At night, Myrcella stands on the balcony above the sea. She hears the sword song Robert cannot hear, the pitch rising and falling like a lullaby twisted by discordant notes. Cresson finds her there, hair unbraided, cheeks red as winterberries, and she asks whether the humming might drive people mad. He strokes his beard in silence, wondering if madness already walks the corridors. He thinks of Valyria before the doom, of mages who claimed to hear the true name of every sword, until the day names rang together and cracked the land. He hugs the child and tucks wolfskin around her shoulders, promising that songs cannot hurt those who remember who they are. He prays the words true. Stannis sets up camp on a wind-scoured headland, refusing Storm's End's hospitality. His tents are Spartan, his men silent save for the rasp of whetstones. He studies the fortress through a spyglass, noting new watchtowers, extra torches along the parapets, archers stationed in crenellations once left bare. Robert is forteing up, girding against foes seen and unseen. Late one evening, a rider brings parchment sealed with stag sigil. Robert invites Stannis to witness a test of the ore's potential at first light. Stannis burns the message over a brazier, embers flashing green, and still the folded ash bears faint traceries of those unknown glyphs. The demonstration takes place on a narrow spit of rock jutting into Shipbreaker Bay. A block of riverrun steel plate 3 fingers thick rises on wooden trestles. Beside it stands a slab quarried from dragonstone, black and pitted. Robert hefts a warhammer whose head is forged of the new alloy, veins of purple chasing one another along its surface like slow lightning. He swings, The Riverrun plate wrinkles, caves, and splits without sound, revealing inner gleam like molten pearl. A second strike on the Dragonstone block sends webbed cracks radiating. G across volcanic glass older than recorded history. The block yawns open, edges glowing dull red. Watching nobles swallow in unison. For if Stormsong is a scalpel, this hammer is a thunderbolt. Yet when Robert raises the weapon overhead for a third blow, the ground buckles underfoot. The veins of or inside the hammer flare hot as forge core. The haft smokes. Robert flings it instinctively into the sea, where it hisses and vanishes beneath boiling froth that steams in winter air. He forces a laugh, but the spectators disperse uneasy, and gossip of an angry sea swallowing the king's hammer reaches fisherfolk by nightfall. Ned Stark rides south through blinding squalls. Upon crossing the Mander, he sees small folk building shrines of driftwood and iron shards, praying to a nameless fire beneath the earth. In inns he overhears verses sung to a new deity, the deep-forged king, half-stag, half-shadow, born of storm and magma. Troubadours claim Stormsong can split mountains. Ned's jaw tightens. He remembers Robert smashing tower doors with a borrowed hammer during the rebellion. But this is different. The stories now drip with augury, with superstition drawn to power like moths to flame. At the Trident, Ned meets Ser Brynden Tully, who confesses unease. Scouts reported a Lannister column moving south with siege engineers, ostensibly to assist, but the old Blackfish smells a chance to plant claws in Storm's End. Together they plot alternate routes through Kingswood, bypassing Lannister camps. Ned thanks Brynden, presses a stag coin into his palm, the face of Robert cast in new midnight metal. Brynden tests the coin's edge, finds it unnaturally sharp, pockets it warily. In the forge, Stoneback coughs metallic dust. Each breath rasps like a file over iron. He twitches in his sleep, muscles spasming to the rhythm of unseen hammers. Apprentices whisper that his pupils shine violet under torchlight, and that when he grips tongs the heated billet curls as though yielding to will, not force. He stays awake longer each night, muttering calculations of heat curves no master smith has ever recorded. And always, near the end of each shift, he presses his ear to the anvil and smiles at something only he can hear. The three Archmesters arrive under black banners bearing the Owl of Hidden Knowledge. Their names, Valar, Morris, and Thothus, are spoken with mingled reverence and dread. They bring scrolls bound in cured basilisk hide, instruments fashioned from jade and bone, and candles whose flames burn bright blue. In the great hall they ask to see Stormsong. Robert bears it proudly. Valar peers through a lens ground so thin it shimmers like liquid. He reports the blade's grain aligns itself each night, erasing imperfections. Metal alive, though thus taps the fuller with a tuning fork. The note produced is lower than human hearing, but the castle's dogs howl. Morris runs gloved fingers along the edge and draws back a shredded gauntlet, though he felt no resistance. They confer in Valyrian whispers thick with sibilance. When Robert presses them for verdict, they bow and say the weapon is peerless, faithful to its master's hand. But no man can bind songs older than language. Use caution, they urge. He hears only praise. Cersei corners Valar hours later, offers Lannister gold for a secret she can wield. The Archmaester declines with courtly gentleness, but Cersei notices his eyes linger on a tapestry showing the doom of Valyria. She files the hunger for later use. Along coastal villages, fishers haul nets full of corpses, deep water creatures boiled in place, flesh sloughing. They blame vents beneath the bay releasing heat and poison. Still they fish. Hunger rides the Stormlands now, for farmland granted to miners lies untilled. Grain imports face tariffs meant to pay for forge materials. Bread prices triple, and riots flare in lesser towns. Gold cloaks quash them with mailed fists, their cudgels tipped with prototype alloy studs that crack bone by mere touch. Word of such brutality runs ahead of ravens, and in the Riverlands banners long folded begin to stir in dusty halls. The night Ned reaches the outskirts of Storm's End. Thunder cracks without lightning. A tremor ripples through the forest floor. Pine needles dance. Ned reins his horse atop a ridge and watches vertiginous blue-white flame thread up from a fissure near the sea cliffs, painting snow cerulean. He presses a cold hand to Winterfell steel at his hip, feeling northern iron solid and dumb, and wonders if Southrons have roused sorcery that will not stop at the neck. Within the fortress, Robert welcomes him with a crushing embrace. They share mulled ale by the hearth while wind moans down chimneys like lamenting ghosts. Robert speaks of forging a legacy that dragons themselves would envy. Ned listens, heart heavy. He tells Robert of small folk left starving, of whispers naming him Forge Reaper. Robert scowls, calls it Lord's propaganda, promises grain relief soon as the first tranche of sword sales fills coffers. Ned sees rings of sleeplessness under his friend's eyes, the tremble in hands that once steadied warhammers bigger than other men's heads. He points gently to the bandaged wrist burn. Infection mottles the skin purple-black. Robert laughs it off, says the metal likes to leave its mark. Across the narrow sea, in a tower overlooking the smoking ruins of Valyria, a pale scholar with quills of wyvern bone records tremors measured by obsidian rods. The rods sing with subterranean resonance identical to vibrations now emanating from Storm's End. He maps fault lines and sees patterns converging on one glyph inscribed upon his tower floor, a spiral crowned by antlers. He sends pigeons bearing crimson ink missives to Pentos, Lys, even distant as high. Power stirs, he writes. The long forge wakes. Back in Westeros, Renly persuades Crescent to slip dream wine into Robert's cup. Perhaps a night's true rest will temper the fever. But Robert's body rejects the draft. He vomits black bile flickering with sparks. The maester collects the bile in a glass jar. Inside, tiny motes of metallic dust swirl like flakes of shaven midnight, aligning to unseen poles. He hides the jar, heart pounding. Loras Tyrell arrives with a tourney retinue, banners snapping green and gold. Under pretext of homage, he surveys defenses, counts watch rotations, marks positions where a swift strike might topple gatehouses. At supper, he flatters Myrcella, dashes wine compliments at Cersei, and studies Robert's veterans. How many crippled by mine accidents, how many shipped south to garrison shipping lanes. He sends coded messages home. The Stormlands bleeds manpower. Stoneback unveils a new forge lined with bricks of fused dragonstone and the meteoric alloy. The flames lick white, hot enough to melt common anvils. When he draws the first ingot from this forge, it glows translucent, pulsing, a heartbeat in metal. He proposes forging armor plates, light and near indestructible. Robert orders full suits for the Kingsguard, beginning with Jaime Lannister, political gesture to soothe lion pride. Jaime arrives, amused, until the fitting reveals metal that seems to shift weight with his posture, balancing him like an extension of bone. He slashes at a straw bale, the bale parts in perfect cross-section. Yet later, alone, he watches candlelight ripple across the breastplate and feels vaguely seasick, as though the reflections move independent of the candle. The mine's lower crew vanishes one shift, 20 men, 3 ponies, a cart of chisels. Searchers find only their helmets, neatly lined along a ledge facing a newly opened rift. No blood, no gear. The rift exhales warmth scented faintly of dragon ichor. Robert orders the level sealed. That night the rift reopens itself, the stone edges molten, as if carved by a blade longer than the tunnel is wide. Stannis calls it a message. Robert calls it a challenge. Crescent witnesses workers lighting oil lamps whose flames take on shapes of stag antlers before guttering. He composes a treatise on spontaneous pyromancy phenomena, seals it in lead-lined scroll case, intends to send it to the Citadel. The scroll never leaves. Ravens from Storm's End begin to fall dead on cliffs, feathers smoldering. Messengers now ride by horse, but more than one is found ash-pale, eyes fused shut, mouth full of gritty black sand. In the red, Keep Varys learns of dead couriers and smiles thinly. He tells Cersei every civilization that meddled with deep fire vanished. Cersei's green eyes glitter. She smells an advantage in Robert's hubris. She dispatches Qyburn, her favorite alchemist, with powders meant to analyze or weaknesses. Qyburn arrives cloaked, hands gloved, and disappears into subtunnels for days. When he resurfaces, his beard is singed, his notes scrawled in unstable ink that eats paper. He reports the alloy can be tempered only by bathing in blood rich with iron. Human works fine, goat workable, but no other matches. Robert dismisses it as macabre jest. Qyburn returns to his quarters, records further observations. The metal resonates most fiercely near hearts still beating. Winterfest approaches, yet in Storm's End courtiers decorate halls with banners depicting hammers wreathed in blue flame rather than evergreen garlands. Robert declares a grand spectacle. At Moon's zenith, he will unveil an alloy shield large enough for 5 men to carry, capable of turning wildfire and dragon's breath. Masons build a dais of blackwood. Nobles gather, smelling of cold sweat and clove oil. Above, aurora lights shimmer, an unheard-of phenomenon this far south. The sky appears split by violet streams, mirroring motes in the shield's face. As trumpets blare, the shield is rolled out, wheeled on an oaken frame. Torchlight strikes its surface and scatters into 1,000 fractal shards. The reflection of each onlooker multiplies until the crowd sees themselves endless, each image wearing an anticipatory grin. Robert strides up, places a mailed palm upon the center. The shield emits a low chord, no louder than a man's humming, yet strong enough to set wine goblets quivering. Panic flickers, but Robert raises both arms and proclaims destiny fulfilled. The shield's cord rises. The aurora above bends, funneling toward the fortress as if drawn by magnet. Snowflakes pause in midfall, suspended. Hair stands on every neck. A crack like world glass shattering splits the night. The shield's face fractures inward, not outward, folding like petals into a pit of black so deep torches fail to illuminate it. From that aperture, a gout of air pours forth colder than northern winter, smelling of rust and ash. The pressure wave knocks guests sprawling. In the chaos, Robert's bellow roars. Close ranks guard the queen, but the aperture begins widening, eating dais, stone, and all. Out of the void steps a silhouette crowned with spiral antlers of living ember. Its skin, if skin, gleams metallic, patterned with glyphs Robert has forbidden to be scratched into shields. Eyes like sunlit furnace doors lock onto Stormsong at Robert's hip. The being tilts its head. A second, taller figure emerges, then a third. No sword points at them can hold steady. Blades tremble, arcs of violet lightning crawl over edges and writhe into the being's chests where they vanish soundless. Baratheon moves first, lightning Fong a dark blur. He lunges. The nearest figure lifts one hand. The sword's point touches an invisible plane and halts as if embedded in diamond. Baratheon strains, veins bulging. The sword does not move forward nor back. A flick of the creature's wrist flings Baratheon 10 yards. He lands hard, armor dented, but alive. Lightning Fong lies quivering, edge smoking. Robert steps onto the ruin of the dais, levels Stormsong, and bellows challenge. The leading entity inclines its head in something like respect, then raises a finger. Symbols trace themselves in glowing relief along its arm, matching those on Stormsong's fuller. The sword shakes so violently Robert's shoulders jolt. He tightens grip, refuses to yield. The blade utters a note, higher than the shield's, pure, piercing. Windows shatter across the yard. The aurora convulses. Ned pulls Myrcella behind broken masonry, shielding her with his body. He watches Robert square off alone against unknown gods born of forge and night, and Ned's heart aches with prescience. Here is how dynasties end. One man stands on cracked stone, holding power too perilous for mortal hand, while old friends clutch children and pray. The entity closes distance not by feet but by folding space. One instant it stands 10 paces off, the next its palm is upon the flat of Stormsong. Robert feels the metal cool and heavy, as though quenched in bottomless ocean. The blade's light dims until black. He jerks free, staggers back. The creature extends its hand again, this time open in supplication, as though requesting return of something stolen. Robert snarls that no Forgeborn specter dictates Baratheon will, and drives Stormsong point first toward the creature's chest. The impact is silent, The blade pierces without resistance, sliding into the ember core within. Light flares blue-white, blinding. A concussive shock erupts. Robert flies backward, sword still clutched, smoke pouring from gauntlets. The creature remains upright. A neat hole gapes through its torso, edges glowing but closing like cooling lava. It regards the wound as one might a raindrop on sleeve. Suddenly, all three beings turn as one toward the mind's direction, heads cocked like hounds hearing a distant horn. They step across nothing, vanish, leaving only a rush of sucked air and a faint ring like hammers on anvil fading over long water. The crowd staggers to its feet, stunned into silence broken only by Robert's ragged breathing. He stands, looks at Stormsong. The blade has turned an opaque shade of charcoal save the edges, which glow ember bright. When he lowers it, the glow dims again. He orders the yard cleared, physicians for the wounded, but few respond. Most stumble away, crossing themselves, gripping talismans. In the darkness after torches are doused, Renly finds Ned amid rubble. They share a look that says words would fail. Renly whispers that Loras has men willing to spirit Myrcella away to Highgarden. Ned shakes his head. Flight invites accusations of treason. The better hope, Ned says, is to reach Robert's heart before obsession devours it. Renly asks whether hearts or swords weigh heavier. Ned answers hearts break, swords do not bend. Far below, caverns glow softly. The rift spews no flame now. Instead it breathes a gentle golden light pulsing with a heartbeat synchronizing to the fortress above. In that heart, miners lie sprawled, asleep or dead, their bodies arrayed in spiral patterns echoing antlered sigils. Between them flows a river of molten metal, carving channels toward deeper blackness where faint shapes stir like fish beneath ice. Maester Crescent brews Strangler to slip into Robert's cup. Mercy for realm and friend alike. But his hands shake, he spills half the vial. He sits, old head in hands, haunted by vision of broken shield petals folding into an abyss. Beneath his palms he feels pulse of the keep through stone, and a rhythmic beat, swiftening. On the headland Stannis endures sleet that stings like shot glass shards. He drafts proclamations declaring himself protector should Robert fall to madness. He knows realm may reject him, yet he trusts law more than affection. In solitary prayer, he asks the Lord of Light for sign. Embers of his campfire spiral upward, briefly forming antler patterns before the wind scours them away. Stannis takes that as answer enough. War is coming, and its banner will burn. In King's Landing, Tywin reads fragmented reports, each more fantastical than the last. He pens orders to ready 2 legions, contracts smiths to craft gold-plated siege engines able to withstand high heat. He knows pride when he smells it. Baratheon pride burned half the realm once already, and when it burns again, Lannister gold must sit beyond the fire's reach, ready to claim the ashes. Across the sea, a red priestess dreams of a stag crowned in blue fire kneeling before shadows of antlered flame. She wakes certain the prophecy of the forged dawn unfolds, but cannot discern whether dawn brings salvation or cinder. Within Storm's End, Robert touches the scabbed hole in his palm where hilt fused to flesh during the clash. He feels bone beneath skin turning slightly hard, metallic. Each flex clicks faintly like links settling. He smiles despite pain, convinced he is not being transformed, but tempered, reborn as weapon equal to foes. He resolves to ride into the mine come sunrise, meet the antlered shades on their own ground, and negotiate forging of a pact. Their secrets for his kingdom's fealty. Kingship is bargain, and he will bargain with gods if need be. Before dawn, Ned intercepts him in the corridor. He blocks the archway, cloak dusted with frost. He begs Robert abandon the descent, seal the mine. Robert pushes past, voice hoarse. Sealing graves won't raise grain or feed armies. Ned says no grain buys worth of unleashed doom. Robert forgets courtesy. He calls Ned fearful, north-cloistered, so bound to the dead gods of Weirwoods he cannot grasp destiny. Ned's eyes flinch once, but grief steadies him. He lays a hand on Robert's shoulder, feels fever heat pulsing like furnace. He says quietly that when first they took up arms it was to free a realm from Dragonfire's madness. How bitter, then, to chain that realm to a forge hotter still. Robert jerks away, strides on. Ned watches him vanish down the stairs, heart cracking along old seams. He turns toward the tower where Myrcella sleeps and ponders word to rouse her quietly. Somewhere behind his ribs echo hollow beats, syncing with the mine. Each beat whispers choice, friend or realm. He sets jaw heads for the stables. The Archmasters hold clandestine congress in a torchlit alcove. They argue whether to advise evacuation or attempt deeper study. Valar insists knowledge outweighs peril, though thus counters that peril now has shape, walks in daylight, and knowledge serves the living only if they remain so. They break when word arrives that Robert intends descent. They scramble to gather instruments, determined to accompany the king. If disaster must happen, better their quills record it firsthand. Sunrise bleeds mauve and copper across cloud bottoms. The party assembles. Robert armored in new plate that molds to his limbs like second skin, Stormsong slung across his back. Baratheon wounded but stubbornly astride. Renly grim. Stannis uninvited yet present, claiming brotherly right. The Archmasters. Ser Donal Swan with 40 picked men. Stoneback, eyes fever bright, carrying tongs forged of the same or saying he must feed the fires. They descend in cage lift swaying over void. Chains groan, echo bouncing through shafts. Each level past rings with distant cries. Perhaps wind, perhaps memory. At Mother Vane level, the cage halts. They step onto platform that smokes underfoot. Trails of molten metal trickle across floor grooves toward deeper darkness like veins feeding a heart. Robert leads, visor lifted, jaw set. The air thrums. Ahead, the rift yawns wider than last recorded, edges smooth as glass. Within glows twilight, a crimson dusk beneath the world where silhouettes of towering pillars drift like slow falling trees. The antlered entities stand arrayed at threshold, their number now 6. In their midst lies a basin of liquid light, surface rippling though no wind stirs. Robert strides forward, Stormsong unsheathed. The blade's edge erupts in harmonic overtones until air vibrates. The entities part, revealing center dais where a sword hovers point down, twin to Stormsong yet lunge. Are and alive with inner flares. Glyphs pulse along its fuller, each flare matched by throb in Robert's wrist. He kneels, not subservient but reverent. He presses Stormsong flat before the dais. The twin blade lowers until its tip kisses the mother or completing circuit. A crackle of energy surges. Stoneback drops tools, knees buckling, mouth agape in ecstasy. Metal veins on walls illuminate, revealing carvings of antlered stags forging worlds on anvils the size of moons. Heat blooms, yet no man sweats. Instead they feel inexorable gravity pulling thoughts inward, forging resolve like billets. Suddenly one entity steps forward, removes its antlered helm. Beneath is a face wrought of mirrored metal, but features shift moment to moment. Sometimes lion, sometimes wolf, sometimes dragon. It speaks not with mouth but through vibration, sentences forming inside listening skulls. Forge King, it calls Robert, bearer of Stormsong, seeker of deep fire pact. It declares the mind not vein but artery connecting to the forge eternal beneath the planet's mantle. Extraction weakens binding of slumbering fires. Yet forging alliance could birth an age of blades unrivaled. The price, a blood tithe equal to the realm's heartbeat. Willingly given, never forced. Robert hesitates. Around him knights clutch hilts, archmasters scribble shorthand curses. Stoneback nods feverishly that tithe is fair. Stannis steps forth, voice flat. No king trades lives for power. Robert snarls that kings have always traded lives. Only the weights shift. He asks what number equals heartbeat of realm. The entity indicates the basin. It must be filled once each year by the chosen of every great house. A symbolic flow. Renly whispers that symbolic flows rarely stay symbolic. Ned hears a voice behind him. He turns to see Myrcella, pale, having stalked him to the lift. She watches her father, eyes swimming. Robert weighs. Visions flicker. Armies clad in knight iron marching unsheared, dragons humbled, peace hammered into shape unbreakable. He lifts Stormsong, touches its tip to his palm, blood wells bright. He walks to basin. Before drop falls, Ned's voice cracks across chamber. Remember Lyanna. Robert freezes, the name slicing old scar deeper. The drop hangs, trembles. The twin blade flashes. The chamber shakes. The entity's eyes flare. In sudden clarity, Robert sees Winterfell's gods would. Sees a brown-haired girl with laughter quick as arrow flight. Sees the rebellion's cost. He lowers sword. Blood drips onto cavern floor instead of basin. It sizzles, evaporates. The entity recoils as if struck. It speaks again, tone lower. Forge King refuses burden. The other entities draw closer, heat rising until armor smokes. Robert roars that a king does not barter his people's souls. He hefts Stormsong in two-handed grip, swings. The blade cleaves shadow and light alike. Antlered helms snap around. Runic spears of incandescent metal arc toward him. Barristan interposes lightning fong, parrying two. Stannis a third with northern forged longsword that cracks on contact. Chaos explodes. Swan's men form wall. Archmesters flee shrieking notes. Stoneback kneels weeping, forging tongs forgotten. The cavern's murals flare alive, figures hammering, sparks falling like meteors. Every strike upon Stormsong sends countertones ricocheting, stones splinter. Above, storm's end quakes. Winter snow shakes from battlements. Renly grabs Myrcella, ushers her to lift, but the lift chain snaps. Cage plummets into black shaft. He curses, drags her toward backup stairs. Behind them pillars collapse, or rivers overflow, molten metal licking boots. Robert fights like legend reborn, yet each parry dims his blade further while the twin glows brighter, feeding on clash. Ned rushes to his side, wielding common steel that steams away, yet he buys Robert breath. Robert shouts for retreat. He will hold passage. Ned refuses, but Robert shoves him bodily, orders Barristan to get the Stark out. Stannis stays. Brother against abyss, their backs meet. They fight in silence save for grunt of effort, centuries of old grievance hammered into moments' unity. Spear points glance off derivative plate, but concussions bruise bones. One thrust pierces Stannis' thigh, metal cauterizes wound instantly. Stink of seared flesh fills air, yet he fights on, expression flint. Crescent, halfway up emergency stairs, feels tremor that ripples through his aging heart. He turns back down, resolves that if Dune claims them, it shall claim him too. Along corridor, he gathers dropped satchels of Archmaester instruments. Above ground, towers crack. Cersei flees to flagship moored in bay. Tyrell envoys mount horses, galloping toward open roads. Lannister engineers sabotage inner gate as prelude to eventual siege, but die beneath falling portcullis when Quake shears chains. The fortress becomes breaking egg. Deep below, Ned drags Stoneback toward stairs. The smith mutters that the forge calls him home. Ned hauls him anyway, feeling heat rise behind. Reaching second stairwell, he throws the smith upward to Renly's arms. Myrcella weeps silent, clutching Ned's cloak. Back in cavern, Robert and Stannis stand before shrinking passage to surface. The twin blade now radiates brilliance, entities converging behind. Robert knows they cannot outrun. He shouts for Stannis to take Stormsong. Royal bloodline cannot end here. Stannis refuses, says crown is Robert's burden. Robert laughs, then drives pommel into Stannis' pauldron, forcing him back. He grins wild. For once, he will do right by realm. He raises sword high, roars an oath older than Undul's, from Storm King lineage that once held these cliffs. Glyphs across cavern walls flare in answer, then implode inward, pulling entities and molten rivers towards center as if gravity reversed. Robert plunges Stormsong into fissure at his feet. The earth screams, white light fountains, enveloping king and antler gods. Stannis is hurled upward, tumbling into corridor, plate smoking. He sees only searing blankness where brother stood. Shockwave races up shafts, floors, towers. Above, Storm's End splits along ancient fault. Walls crumble outward into bay. Sea rushes to fill chasm, steaming. Lift cages, carts, smithy, gone. The castle's drum towers remain miraculously standing like twin molars in ruined jaw. Ned, Renly, Myrcella, Barristan, Cresson, Stoneback, Archmesters, and ragged handful of knights stagger onto outer Barbican moments before inner yard collapses. They watch the keep's heart sink into smoking sea. They hear nothing. Ears ring from pressure. Snow falls upward in curls, then drifts down again. Hours pass. Rescue crews search breach but find no bodies, only shards of midnight or cooling to glass. At dusk, Stannis limps through shattered gate, helmet gone, eyes twin embers of resolve. He addresses survivors. The king is dead, realm in peril. They must secure succession. Renly counters that Robert's children stand heir. Stannis snaps that bastards may not inherit. Quarrel ignites anew amid ruin. Ned kneels where fissure still steams, places hand on collapsed masonry warm as forged stone. He whispers farewell to friend lost twice, once to crown, now to abyss. In his palm, he finds a flake of metal thinned to translucent sheet. He pockets it, unsure why. Far out on black water, Cersei's ship points sails toward King's Landing, green lanterns blinking code. Stag-felled, lion ascendant. In her cabin, Jaime stares at his new armor, noting faint cracks spiderwebbing outward from where shield explosions struck him hours earlier. The cracks glow. In Old Town bells toll. Archmesters conferring with ravens from field labs declare deep fire manifestations widespread now. Reports of singing or veins surface in the Reach, the Vale, even Dorne's Red Mountains. Something has awakened and begun to call siblings to voice. On nights thereafter, small folk swear the aurora persists, ghostly violet strands weaving words in skies no maester can read. Fishermen speak of a hammer-shaped constellation newly born, head pointing at Storm's End's ruins. They say the king now sits in stars, forging a blade to cleave dawn from dusk. Ned rides north with Myrcella under his protection, heart torn, mind already writing letters of warning to every lord he trusts. Stannis gathers loyalists at Dragonstone, forging new seals depicting a crowned stag wreathed not in flame but in sober iron. Renly vanishes west, south, rumor chasing him to High Garden. In the empty forge womb beneath the sea, twin blade rests upright in cooling slag, glyphs pulsing slow, waiting. The heartbeat of the world echoes through drowned shafts, measuring time in molten dreams. Storm song is gone, folded into mantle, but fragments drift in currents, washing ashore to curious hands. And somewhere beyond charts, the antler-helmed beings convene around an anvil of eclipsed sun metal, debating silently whether mankind still qualifies as apprentice or as rival. Their verdict will hinge upon tides of blood, upon songs yet hammered. Above, winter deepens and ravens fly carrying sparks of metal dust on their wings, scattering prophecy across 7 kingdoms, soon to learn the true price of forging thunder. Snow crusted the ruins of Storm's End for 3 full days before the wind swung east and turned the drifts to dirty slush. Smoke still curled from vents along the half-collapsed cliff, but the smell had changed. It was sharper now, laced with something like singed copper and crushed violet petals. Ned Stark tasted it on the back of his tongue and thought of the smithies of Winterfell after blacksmith Mikken quenched a blade in brine. It was the taste of metal being born, or of something dying very slowly. He stood on the shattered barbican with Maester Cresson and watched fishing boats slide through a fog tinged lavender by dawn. Below, what had once been the inner yard was a blackened bay full of steaming surf and jagged spars of masonry. No one had yet found Robert's body. Some believed the king had fallen into the ever-deepening fissure and been swallowed whole. Others whispered, when they thought no one could hear, that the antlered spirits had taken him, forging his fury into one of their own silent warriors. Ned clung to a simpler pain. His friend was dead, and Westeros had lost its hammer. The survivors sheltered in the drum towers, the only segments of the fortress left standing. Rain seeped through mortar joints, and the wind keened through rents in stained glass windows that no longer held saints' faces. Cressen's healers worked among bundled forms, but supplies ran thin. Grain wagons from the Stormlands interior had not arrived. Roads lay cracked, bridges buckled from the tremor that rolled outward during Robert's final stand. Each dawn Ned expected a Lannister fleet on the horizon. The gold cloaks who had sailed away with Queen Cersei would be in King's Landing by now, tongues busy, painting the king's death as madness brought on by sorceress Steel and the gullible Stark who had failed to curb it. Ned's bannermen lay 800 leagues distant. Winter snow in the neck would slow any raven, so he readied a smaller defense, Truth. He had dictated 6 copies of the day's events, each bearing his seal and Cressen's trembling signature. One he entrusted to a tall Dornish courier sworn to House Dane, one to a Septon of the Starry Faith, and one to a Tyroshi spice captain who claimed easy entrance to every port from Old Town to Pentos. The last 3 he would carry north himself. If rumor was wildfire, let truth be river water. That morning, Ned descended to the last stable yard to choose a mount. Only a handful of horses remained, bones showing beneath winter coats. Myrcella clung to a pale mare's neck, cheeks glistening with tears. The princess scarcely spoke. Since the collapse, she lurked at his elbow like a timid shadow. She had seen her father vanish in flame and void. Her mother had fled before the disaster. Ned stroked her hair gently and coaxed the reins from her small hands. He told her they would ride for Winterfell, where snowmen smiled and wolves howled lullabies. She asked whether the wolves ever ate little girls. Ned said the wolves of Winterfell guarded children, as long as the children told the truth. Myrcella nodded and allowed him to lift her onto the saddle before him. They left at sunrise with a column of 20 riders. Ser Barristan, his silver hair singed. Ser Donal Swan limping but stubborn. Maester Cressen bundled in furs. And half a dozen archmesters who had refused passage on Cersei's ships, their curiosity greater than loyalty. Renly remained behind to oversee the wounded, promising they would join at Storm's Mouth crossing in a fortnight. Stoneback refused to come at all. He had taken command of what forge remained. The smith's eyes shone fever-bright as he promised new wonders from or shards salvaged in debris. Ned did not argue. Madness carried its own blade. The party skirted the rainwood beneath trees snapped like matchsticks. Where earthquakes had opened the forest floor, strange crystals glimmered, growing in fractal plates. One archmaester insisted on chiseling a fist-sized chunk. That night his palms blistered with violet pustules, and by dawn the flesh sloughed away in glimmering scales. Cressen bled him thrice and laved the wounds with honey, but the man raved of voices singing in every splinter, begging to be forged into shape. At Tarth they found the port choked with wreckage. Masts splintered, keels upended. A fisherman said the sea had boiled, and steam devils had danced across the waves. Still, traders loaded holds with rain-warped timber and filthy tin or wrenched from hills suddenly rich in metallic veins. Prices for raw steel had collapsed. Everyone wanted the black ore instead. Ned hired a galley, the Northwind, to ferry them around Blackwater Bay. The captain spoke of bright columns rising from the sea floor off Massey's Hook, glowing like torches in the deep. She swore she saw silhouettes swimming through them, slow and regal, their limbs trailing sparks. Barristan met Ned's gaze in silence. Both remembered antlered shapes gliding through molten air. They made Dragonstone in 2 days, sails bulging with unnatural gusts that smelled of struck iron. Stannis's banners flew alongside fiery hearts newly stitched on black fields. At the quay stood the Lord himself, still favoring a bandaged leg. Behind him, ranks of sailors wore breastplates marbled with faint purple striations. Ned knew iron when he saw it, and knew these plates would snap any common sword. Stannis inclined his head, gray eyes smoldering. They spoke long in the stone drum's map room while Myrcella ate sweet oranges and watched the painted table, its coasts now flickering with tiny violet motes wherever the ore had surfaced. Stannis confirmed rumor. Deep fire veins had erupted in the stepstones, the Vale, and even at Casterly Rock's lower tunnels. Tywin had sealed his mines, but not before carting away wagons of ore. In Qohor, 9-day forgers brewed something called Starglass, claiming it would cut Valyrian steel like cheese. Kings, Khals, spice guilds. Everyone grasped for the singing metal. "The world has bared its throat," Stannis said, and lions sharpened claws behind a smiling mask. He wanted Ned's vow. Stark banners for his claim when the inevitable war ignited. Ned's heart ached. He believed Stannis had right by law, yet Robert's daughter sat in Ned's charge. More innocent than any line in a charter. He offered no vow. Instead, he asked Stannis to escort Myrcella safely north. Stannis bristled. Such a hostage could be coin for swords. Ned answered that children were no coin to spend. Their debate ended in brittle truce. Stannis granted ships and supplies but little warmth. 2 nights later, Davos Seaworth slipped into Ned's quarters. The smuggler knight opened a satchel and revealed a black shard no longer than a dirk. A fragment of storm song, he claimed, washed onto Driftmark's shore still humming with mournful vibrations. Davos had tried to throw it back to sea. The shard returned each dawn, planted on his doorstep. He feared the thing. Ned wrapped it in sealskin and promised to take it far inland. Yet, as he knotted the cords, he fancied the shard pulsed faintly against his palm, echoing his heartbeat. They left Dragonstone under cover of heavy snow squalls, rowing to the northwind while gusts howled like dire wolves over breakers. Off Cape Wrath, a strange aurora poured violet curtains across southern sky. Bolts of silent lightning flickered in cloud bellies, illuminating shapes of drifting ash. The sailors crossed themselves and spat seawater. By the time they reached White Harbor, word had outrun them. Robert dead, deep fire spreading, Lannister banners marching on Storm's End's shell. Lord Wyman Manderly received Ned with tears and roast goose. He pledged men to guard Myrcella on her trek inland and promised a fast ship to return Crescent and the Archmesters to Old Town. Yet each harbor story sharpened the threat. Lannisport forges pounded day and night. Dornish raiders stole or caravans bound for King's Landing. The Tyrells hosted Renly at Highgarden, weaving marriage talk around a crown of hammered night iron leaves. Northward, snow deepened. The King Road lay pitted by frost quakes, thin fractures that sighed warm air smelling faintly of brimstone. At one such fissure, Ned pressed his ear to the ice and swore he heard a deep rhythmic clang, like anvils striking at the world's heart. The shard of storm song, slung in a leather pouch beneath his cloak, grew warm. 3 days' ride from Winterfell, they met a column of black cloaks. Benjen Stark leading 50 rangers south to investigate glowing pillars said to rise beyond the wall. Benjen embraced his brother, then eyed the Lannister girl with wary courtesy. He reported dire news. Weirwoods across the haunted forest bled sapped the color of old bronze, and some rangers swore faces carved in the trees had changed, mouths open as if mid-scream. Ravens flew erratic, roosting on the ground as though sky magnetized them downward. Worse, tracks of giants had been seen walking toward the Frostfangs, drawn by distant thunder under frozen earth. When they reached Winterfell's gates, wolves howled long and mournful. Bran, now gangly and solemn, waited in the courtyard, flanked by Rickon clutching Shaggy Dog's fur. Bran said the Heart Tree had whispered of a sword song riding south astride wolf blood and lion tears. Ned hushed him, shepherded Myrcella to a guest suite, and posted guards sworn only to the north. That night, snow blanketed the castle so thick the towers looked carved of pale marble. Ned dreamt of Lyanna's bed of winter roses, each petal edged in violet flame. When he woke, the shard sealskin lay scorched, and the fragment pulsed like a dying star. Across the narrow sea, the free cities sensed new calculus. Qohor set embargoes, selling or only in forged ingots bound by blood contracts. Bravos forbade deep fire shipping through the Titan Strait. Still, smugglers ran cargoes by moonless tides. In Volantis, a priest of R'hllor preached that the metal was the marrow of an old god slain at world's birth, and forging it anew would quicken the long night. Slave crowds listened, afraid and fascinated. At Casterly Rock, Tyrion Lannister prowled tunnels deep beneath his father's throne. He held a lantern of green witchglass, mapping sudden fractures veining marble halls. Each fracture exhaled warm air laced with glittering motes. He collected a tablespoon of the dust for Grand Maester Pycelle, though he doubted the old leeches could cure this wound. Above, his father's smiths worked around the clock, hammering or billets into arrowheads sharp enough to see. Ut thought. Tyrion worried more for what arrowheads cut in silence. The bonds between houses. King's Landing simmered. Cersei proclaimed Joffrey king, draping him in a cloak woven with black iron threads so thin they rippled like oil. The small folk cheered. Bread wagons rolled free that day. But at night, shadowy figures threaded streets, whispering of a stag ghost wandering the Red Keep's vaults, antler crown flickering blue above empty shoulders. Gold cloaks who pursued such rumors returned with eyes glazed and voices hoarse from screaming obscure songs. Back in Old Town, the Archmesters presented Cressen's accounts to the conclave. Debates flared hotter than the forge he had fled. Some argued for quarantining every discovered vein. Others demanded mastery over Deepfire before Qohor cornered the secrets. The conclave split, fractious as cracked steel. When Cressen rose to speak, his knees buckled. Violet blotches mottled his skin. He died that night, lungs filling with metallic dust. His candle burned blue to the end. Winterfell tried to forget the distant forge wars. Ned set men to patrol cracks opening in the Wolfswood, and he forbade miners near hot springs to dig deeper. Still, one dawn the hot pools steamed purple. Fish floated belly up, scales iron-sheened. Bran dreamt through weir gates of a stag forged from star metal standing on the wall, antlers wreathed in northern lights. Summer the dire wolf howled at dawn, and ice on the ponds shattered in fractal patterns shaped like antler crowns. One quiet supper, Maester Luwin confessed that messages from the Citadel now arrived fewer and stranger. Scrolls embroidered with glyphs unknown, written in inks that shimmered between colors. He feared the order fracturing. Ned rubbed stress from his brow. In child years, he thought peace had been iron. Now even iron was suspect. Myrcella spent afternoons in the Godswood, tracing weirwood veins with mittened fingers. Arya taught her to shoot a bow. Sansa braided her golden hair with northern bluebells. The girl smiled rarely, but when she did, Ned felt hope bloom. Still, he saw her start at hammer blows from the smithy, and at night she slept clutching a simple northern dagger he had given her, a comfort of honest steel. The shard of Stormsong lay locked in a cedar chest beneath the crypts, but on windless nights its hum reached Ned's dreams. He began to fear what song it might be teaching his dead ancestors. Finally, he summoned his steward and ordered a journey to the wall. He would fling the fragment beyond the Frostfangs, where only giants and ghosts would hear it. Jon Snow volunteered to ride with him, a bastard's duty to carry unnameable things where men dare not go. Ned embraced the boy, wishing he could deny the call, but Deepfire sang of obligations beyond warmth of hearth. They set out with Benjen's rangers at first thaw. As they crossed Last River, Aurora flared even at high noon, shimmering flags across turquoise sky. By dusk, they smelled brimstone drifting south. At the night fort, they met 3 wildlings bearing gifts, strange knives etched with ancient spirals. They claimed the others would rise soon because the world's bones had cracked and something new slithered inside. They begged passage south. Jon granted it on Ned's nod. That night, a blue star fell into the haunted forest, shaking the wall like a drum. Men on watch reported singing that came not to ear but to blood. Somewhere far south, in a cellar of Storm's End's broken shell, Stoneback tended crucibles glowing white. From each, thin rivulets of molten or dripped into molds shaped as human hearts. At every drip he murmured Robert's name. Sparks spattered on stone, hissing like distant surf. Behind him, antlered silhouettes watched silently, their eyes embers reflected in newborn metal. Stoneback smiled, though tears seared tracks down sooty cheeks. He spoke to the shapes as comrades. Tomorrow, he promised, the first heart would cool, and then the song could truly begin. Renly, marching north with a Tyrell host, received Ravenless news. Stannis had declared for the Iron Throne and melted half the old Baratheon armory into Deepfire half-plates. Renly replied by commissioning a crown of night iron petals and naming himself the true flower heart of Westeros. War drums began beating where once horns of harvest had sounded. On a hill near Bitterbridge, a Tyrell smith tested arrowheads against a practice shield. The shaft passed through wood, iron, and the stone post beyond, bursting into sparks that skittered across frozen grass. One spark touched a droplet of spilled oil. Purple flame whirled skyward, forming for an instant the image of a stag rearing. The host cheered. Above them, the aurora glimmered like 1,000 phantom standards. South in Sunspear, Princess Arianne studied a shard of or stolen from the Stormlands. She placed it in a brass bowl, poured Dornish red across it, and watched wine hiss into vapor that smelled of hot sand. The shard dissolved, leaving runes etched in the bowl. Serpents devouring suns. She smiled. Dorne had long memories and deeper fires of its own. In a crypt beneath Winterfell, Ned opened the cedar chest one last time. The fragment sang like a bee trapped in glass, bright and urgent. He wrapped it in rawhide and spoke a soft farewell to Lynna's stone effigy. Then he threw a thick cloak over his shoulders and climbed toward dawn's pale light, where Jon waited with ghost pacing. They would ride before sunrise, into a north no longer merely white and silent, but humming with the world's new forge pulse. As he mounted, Ned glanced east. A faint glow limned the horizon. Sunrise, perhaps, or the first edge of something stranger. The air tasted of cold iron and distant storm. He breathed deep, then clicked his horse forward. The hoofbeats rang out across fresh snow, and beneath the crust the earth answered. A low, clangorous echo marching north, toward destinies being hammered into shape with each measured stride.